2:09 in the morning, a GPS-tracked milk tanker crosses from Iowa into Illinois on a 2-lane state highway. The driver has been on the road since 11 p.m. The tank holds 6,200 gallons of milk collected from 4 farms across 2 Iowa counties. The GPS system, logging the truck's position every 90 seconds, also logs the tank temperature, 37 degrees Fahrenheit, within the acceptable range, and the time elapsed since the first farm pickup of the route. That elapsed time will appear in the quality record that the receiving plant generates when the tanker arrives. If it exceeds 48 hours from the first pickup, the load enters a different review process regardless of temperature. The driver does not work for any of the 4 farms whose milk he carries. He works for a transportation company under contract with Dairy Farmers of America. DFA is the largest dairy cooperative in the United States. It coordinates approximately 11,000 member farms across 48 states. Those farms collectively produce over 55 billion pounds of milk annually. The network of GPS-tracked tankers, regional laboratories, and logistics coordinators that moves that milk from farm bulk tanks to processing facilities represents one of the largest perishable food logistics operations on the planet. Not in terms of revenue, but in terms of the biological urgency of what it moves and the geographic scale across which it moves it. Milk cannot wait. From the moment it leaves a cow, a clock runs. Temperature management slows that clock. Nothing stops it. The entire infrastructure of DFA, the tanker fleet, the routing software, the quality laboratories, the processing facilities, the supply contracts with food manufacturers, exists to serve the imperative that 55 billion pounds of perishable liquid must reach processing before it becomes something other than food. Understanding how a cooperative that spans 48 states and 11,000 farms manages that imperative requires beginning at the beginning. With a structure that holds 11,000 independent farm families in a single organizational relationship. The cooperative model in American agriculture developed from a specific economic vulnerability: the isolated seller. A dairy farmer in 1900 produced milk that spoiled within hours if not processed. The creamery that processed milk into butter, the only dairy product that traveled more than a short distance without refrigeration, was typically the only buyer within practical reach. When the creamery set a price, the farmer accepted it or let the milk spoil. There was no third option. No alternative market, no leverage. The perishable product and the geographic isolation together created a bargaining dynamic that extracted value from the farmer and transferred it to the processor. The cooperative model addressed this by organizing sellers into a collective. A group of dairy farmers selling together could negotiate prices that no individual farmer could demand. A cooperative that owned or controlled processing capacity could eliminate the intermediary entirely, capturing the processing margin for its member owners. The legal framework, the Capper-Volstead Act of 1922, which explicitly exempted agricultural cooperatives from antitrust law enforcement that would otherwise prohibit sellers from collectively fixing prices, gave the cooperative model federal sanction. Dairy cooperatives proliferated across the dairy regions of the Midwest, Northeast, and West through the 20th century. By the 1980s, hundreds of regional cooperatives served defined geographic territories, each negotiating with processors on behalf of their specific member bases. The consolidation pressure that reshaped every sector of American agriculture. The economic advantages of scale compressing margins for smaller operators eventually reached cooperative structure itself. Dairy Farmers of America formed in 1998 through the merger of four major regional cooperatives: Mid-America Dairymen, Milk Marketing Incorporated, to Western Dairymen Cooperative, and Southern Belle Dairy. The merger created a single cooperative with member farms across most of the country, a scale of milk marketing that dwarfed any predecessor organization, and, critically, a bargaining position with processors and food manufacturers that reflected the combined supply power of the merged membership. Subsequent acquisitions and mergers added additional cooperatives and member farms over the following 2 decades, building the 11,000 farm network that DFA currently coordinates. Each addition brought a regional milk pool, regional transportation infrastructure, regional processing relationships, and regional quality management systems that had to be integrated into the DFA-wide platform. The milk marketing function, determining where each farm's milk goes, at what price, and on what schedule, is the core economic service that DFA provides its member farms. 11,000 farms producing milk every day creates a supply that must be matched to demand in real time. On any given day, some farms produce more than usual. The spring flush, when cows on pasture or recently transitioned from dry cow status, flood the pool with high-volume production. And some processors need more or less than their contracted volume. DFA's marketing team navigates this supply-demand matching continuously, directing milk from farms with excess supply toward plants with capacity and coordinating diversion to alternative processing outlets when the regular channels are saturated. The milk marketing system runs on federal milk marketing orders, a regulatory framework that governs milk pricing in most of the continental United States. The FMMO system classifies milk into 4 uses: Class 1 for fluid consumption, Class 2 for soft manufactured products like ice cream and yogurt, Class 3 for hard cheese, and Class 4 for butter and powder. Each class carries a different minimum price, with Class 1 commanding the highest premium because fluid milk's short shelf life and consumer demand for freshness justify a premium over manufactured dairy products. DFA's marketing team coordinates milk flows across all 4 classes, maximizing the price received by the member pool by directing milk toward its highest value use whenever capacity exists. A region that has more fluid milk capacity than its farm's production receives milk from adjacent regions through interregional transfers. A region with a large cheese plant and limited fluid capacity sends milk to the cheese plant and earns the Class 3 price. The aggregate price received by the pool, the blend price, reflects the weighted average of all classes utilized, and that blend price determines what each member farm receives per hundredweight of milk delivered. The complexity of managing this system across 48 states, 11,000 farms, and multiple federal milk marketing order regions simultaneously requires data infrastructure and analytical capacity that no regional cooperative of the 1970s could have sustained. DFA's cooperative-wide data management systems track daily production from every member farm, daily capacity utilization at every contracted or owned processing facility, real-time pricing across commodity dairy markets, and the logistics pipeline that connects farms to plants through the tanker network. The GPS tracked tanker fleet that moves milk from 11,000 farms to processing facilities is the physical expression of DFA's marketing function. The fleet is not uniform in size, ownership, or management. DFA coordinates milk transportation through a combination of company-owned tankers, cooperative-owned regional fleets, and contracted independent haulers who operate under DFA logistics management. The diversity of ownership reflects the geographic diversity of the cooperative. In some regions, DFA operates its own transportation directly. In others, regional transportation companies with deep existing relationships with local farms provide the physical hauling under DFA's coordination. GPS tracking provides a common data layer across this diverse fleet. Every tanker in the DFA network, regardless of ownership, reports position, speed, process, and tank temperature on a continuous basis to the logistics management system. The system identifies delayed routes, off-temperature tanks, and scheduling gaps that need intervention, alerting regional coordinators who can redirect trucks, adjust pickup sequences, or dispatch backup vehicles when primary routes encounter problems. The routing optimization that determines which farms a given tanker serves on a given route balances several competing factors simultaneously. The farm daily production volume, the amount of milk that accumulated in the farm's bulk tank since the last pickup, must not exceed the tank's capacity, which means high-volume farms need more frequent pickups than low-volume farms. The total milk volume of a planned route must not exceed the tanker's capacity. The geographic sequence of farm pickups must minimize total drive time. And the total route duration from first pickup to plant arrival must stay within the 48-hour quality window that both regulatory standards and plant receiving requirements impose. A routing system that optimizes these variables across 11,000 farms, multiple plants, and a fleet of hundreds to thousands of trucks requires software that accounts for farm production, forecasts updated daily, plant receiving schedules updated continuously, road and weather conditions that affect drive times, and the real-time status of every truck in the fleet. DFA's logistics management system operates this optimization across the full national network, generating route assignments that the regional coordinators can override when local knowledge identifies a factor the software has not captured. The quality testing infrastructure that DFA maintains for its 11,000 farm membership is a laboratory network sized to the scale of the milk pool it monitors. Every bulk tank pickup generates a sample. The sample moves to a regional laboratory that is part of DFA's quality management system. At the laboratory, the sample undergoes analysis for somatic cell count, bacteria count, butterfat and protein percentages, and antibiotic residue. The results return to the farm's individual quality record, where they accumulate into the performance history that determines the farm's quality premium or discount, triggers quality team interventions when standards drift, and provides the data the cooperative needs to certify the quality of the milk pool it markets. The volume of testing this requires is substantial. 11,000 farms with pickups averaging every 48 hours produces approximately 5,500 tests per day across the network. Regional laboratories distributed through DFA's geographic footprint handle this volume by processing samples from the farms in their region, returning results within 24 to 48 hours of sample receipt. The antibiotic residue testing that occurs at every pickup receives particular operational priority because of the commingling risk that tanker collection creates. A single farm's antibiotic-contaminated milk, collected into a tanker that also carries milk from 7 other farms, can contaminate the entire tanker load. If that contaminated load reaches a processing plant and enters a production batch, the financial consequence, rejected product, plant shut down for cleaning, loss regulatory action, extends far beyond the individual farm responsible. DFA's pre-collection testing protocols at high-risk farms and the receiving plant's mandatory testing of every incoming load before discharge create 2 verification points that prevent contaminated milk from entering the processing system. When a positive antibiotic test occurs at the farm before pickup or at the plant receiving dock, the response is immediate and documented. The tanker load involved does not enter the plant. The farm responsible for the contamination faces financial liability for the rejected load. The event triggers a quality review that examines why the contamination occurred and what management changes the farm must implement. DFA's owned and operated processing facilities represent a dimension of the cooperative's business that distinguishes it from cooperatives that function purely as milk marketing organizations. A marketing-only cooperative collects milk from members, negotiates prices, and supply contracts with independent processors, and returns the negotiated price to members after deducting the cooperative's operating costs. This model is simple and transparent, but leaves the cooperative dependent on processors' continued willingness to pay competitive prices and accept the milk volume the membership produces. DFA's investment in its own processing facilities, butter and powder plants, cheese operations, fluid milk processing, and other dairy manufacturing gives it an internal outlet for milk that would otherwise depend entirely on third-party processor relationships. When third-party processor demand contracts, when a cheese plant cuts its contracted volume during a period of market oversupply, DFA's own plants can absorb some of the displaced milk, protecting the blend price the membership receives. The processing operations that DFA owns also generate manufacturing margins that contribute to the cooperative's financial health alongside the milk marketing margins. A pound of butter processed at a DFA-owned plant returns the combined value of the milk marketing margin and the butter manufacturing margin to the cooperative's earnings pool. Over time, this dual margin model builds the financial capacity that DFA uses for infrastructure investment, acquisition financing, and the operating reserves that a cooperative managing 55 billion pounds of perishable product annually must maintain. DFA also supplies major food manufacturers, companies that use dairy ingredients in everything from processed cheese to protein supplements to infant formula to food service preparations. These supply relationships provide outlets for the dairy ingredients, concentrated milk proteins, anhydrous milk fat, dry whey, non-fat dry milk that DFA's processing operations produce, or connecting the farm-level milk pool to the industrial food manufacturing sector that absorbs large volumes of dairy commodities. The milk markets that DFA navigates, the Federal Milk Marketing Order Pricing System, the commodity dairy markets for butter and cheese and powder, the supply contracts with food manufacturers, fluctuate in ways that create financial volatility for member farms regardless of how well the cooperative manages the milk. When cheese prices fall, yes, Class 3 milk prices fall. When butter prices collapse, Class 4 prices fall. When fluid milk demand contracts as consumer preferences shift toward alternatives, Class 1 utilization declines, and the premium that Class 1 pricing provides to the pool shrinks. These market movements are not within DFA's control. The cooperative can optimize the marketing, maximizing utilization of each class, capturing available premiums, as managing supply to avoid overmarket positions that depress prices, but it cannot prevent the markets from moving in directions that reduce what farms receive. The dairy commodity market has experienced cycles of extreme volatility that have pushed farm milk prices below the cost of production for extended periods. In 2009, 2012, 2016, and 2020, U.S. dairy farm income dropped sharply enough that farm exits accelerated, debt levels increased, and the cooperative's membership shrank through the permanent departure of farms that could not survive the downturn. DFA responds to these cycles through a combination of risk management programs, hedging tools available to member farms that can reduce the impact of price volatility on individual farm cash flow, and advocacy for federal dairy policy instruments that provide income support during periods of extreme price decline. The Dairy Margin Coverage Program, a federal program that provides payments to farms when the national average milk price falls below a margin threshold relative to feed costs, represents one such policy instrument that DFA's advocacy team has supported as partial protection against the volatility that commodity markets generate. But the fundamental economics of dairy farming, high fixed costs in land, facilities, and cow inventory, variable milk prices that can drop below variable production costs, and the biological reality that cows must be milked every day regardless of what the market is doing, create financial pressure that no cooperative structure entirely resolves. The cooperative's value is in improving the price received relative to what unorganized individual sellers would achieve, not in eliminating the commodity market's power over dairy farm economics. The 48-state geographic scope of DFA's membership creates operational complexity that regional cooperatives don't face. A cooperative serving farms in Wisconsin and Minnesota operates within a defined federal milk marketing order region where transportation distances between farms and processors are manageable, where regional quality standards apply uniformly, and where the cooperative staff can maintain direct operational relationships with member farms. When that cooperative expands to include farms in New Mexico, Florida, and Oregon simultaneously, every dimension of that operational relationship stretches across distances and regulatory jurisdictions that regional structures weren't designed to manage. DFA addresses this through a regional operating structure that divides the national membership into geographic regions, each with its own management team, regional laboratories, and transportation coordination. The regional structure preserves operational proximity, the ability for regional staff to visit member farms, respond to local quality issues, and understand the specific agricultural conditions that affect milk production in that region, while connecting the regional operations to the national marketing and data management infrastructure that gives DFA its scale advantage. The regional divisions correspond roughly to the territories of the predecessor cooperatives that merged to form DFA, or that subsequently joined. In the Upper Midwest, the legacy of Mid-America Dairymen's regional operations shapes the transportation network and processing relationships that still serve that member base. In the Southeast, the legacy of Southern Bell structures the quality management and transportation systems serving farms in that climate and geography. Each region's specific infrastructure reflects both the physical geography, road networks, distances between farms, locations of processing facilities, and the operational history of the cooperative relationships that built that infrastructure over decades. The data management systems that coordinate 11,000 farms, hundreds of tankers, dozens of processing facilities, and the national milk marketing function into a coherent operational picture represent one of the less visible but most operationally significant investments DFA has made. Daily production reports from member farms, a real-time tanker position and temperature monitoring, receiving plant inventory and capacity data, regional laboratory test results linked to individual farm records, FMMO pricing data, updated multiple times daily, commodity market prices for butter, cheese, and powder, manufacturing yields at DFA-owned plants, supply contract volumes and delivery schedules for food manufacturer customers. All of this data accumulates continuously in systems that aggregate it into the management views that DFA's regional coordinators, marketing team, transportation dispatchers, and quality staff use to make daily operational decisions. The complexity of this data landscape, applied to 55 billion pounds of a perishable product flowing through a network spanning 48 states, generates decision-making demands that the cooperative staff navigates daily. A regional transportation coordinator in the Upper Midwest managing the daily routing for 150 trucks serving 600 farms operates in a continuous problem-solving environment where farms calling to report equipment failures, roads closed by weather, driver scheduling gaps, and plant receiving schedule changes require real-time route adjustments that ripple through the day's logistics plan. The GPS data from the tanker fleet provides the real-time visibility that makes those adjustments possible. A coordinator who knows the position of every truck in the region can identify a truck that is running behind schedule, assess whether the delay will push its delivery beyond the plant's receiving window, and redirect a truck that is running ahead of schedule to cover the delayed route's final stops. Without that real-time visibility, the same situation produces a blind problem-solving exercise, where the coordinator is working from scheduled times rather than actual positions. Out of 55 billion pounds of milk per year, the number is large enough to require decomposition before it yields a meaningful picture. 55 billion pounds per year divides to approximately 150 million pounds per day. 11,000 farms averaging 13,636 pounds per day. At 8.6 pounds per gallon, 150 million pounds per day represents roughly 17.4 million gallons. A river of milk moving daily from farmhouse bulk tanks through a tanker fleet into processing facilities across 48 states. The river doesn't flow at the same rate across the year. The spring flush, when pasture-based and transition cows reach peak production simultaneously, raises daily output above the annual average by 10 to 15%. Summer months in warmer dairy regions see production dip as heat stress reduces feed intake and milk yield. The processing and transportation infrastructure must handle peak flow without the quality failures that come from inadequate capacity, and must run economically through the lower flow months when some of that capacity sits underutilized. DFA manages seasonal variation through a combination of inventory management in commodities that can be stored, butter, cheese, powder, and active supply management that encourages production adjustments through price signals when the market is long and discourages excess supply through cooperative programs when the national pool produces more than the market can absorb at profitable prices. The cooperative's role as the largest single dairy cooperative in the country gives it the potential to influence national dairy supply in ways that smaller regional cooperatives cannot. DFA's marketing decisions, how aggressively to push milk into commodity manufacturing versus holding for fluid premium, when to encourage member farms to consider supply management programs, how to position the cooperative's owned processing capacity relative to third-party processor relationships, shape the national dairy commodity market in ways that are sometimes visible to the smaller cooperatives and independent processors who compete alongside it. The 11,000 farms that form DFA's membership exist on a spectrum that spans the full range of modern dairy farming. At one end, a 180-cow family operation in Vermont, milking twice daily in a conventional stanchion barn, is producing 15,000 pounds per day, managed by a husband and wife who have owned the farm for 30 years and whose dairy income determines whether their adult children will have an agricultural future to inherit. At the other, a 8,000-cow operation in Idaho using robotic milking systems, precision feeding, and sensor-based individual cow monitoring, producing 800,000 pounds per day, employing 60 people. Generating data volumes that feed directly into DFA's quality management systems through automated interfaces. Both are DFA members. Both receive the same blend price per hundredweight from the same milk pool. Both receive the same quality testing services and the same transportation logistics coordination. The cooperative structure does not differentiate between them on these dimensions. The cooperative exists to serve all of its members equally, under the one-member, one-vote governance structure that cooperative law prescribes. In practice, the interests of a 180-cow Vermont farm and an 8,000-cow Idaho operation align imperfectly. The large farm generates more milk marketing revenue for the cooperative per farm. It also generates more political weight within the cooperative's governance if governance is organized around production volume rather than simple farm count. The governance structures that DFA has developed attempt to balance the interests of small and large members, but the fundamental tension that operations of dramatically different scale and economic circumstance must share a single marketing pool and a single cooperative structure is not resolved by organizational design. It is managed imperfectly because the alternative is fragmentation that eliminates the scale advantage both need. The tanker on the Illinois highway completes its run at 4:47 a.m. The plant's receiving dock logs the arrival time, the temperature, the load volume, and the originating farms. The sample moves to the laboratory. The driver disconnects the hose, completes the delivery paperwork, and begins the return leg toward his next pickup assignment. In Iowa, the farms whose milk just arrived at this plant have already completed the morning milking. The bulk tanks are filling again. By this time tomorrow, another tanker will make the same run. Across 48 states, 11,000 other farms are doing the same thing at this same hour. Cows being milked, bulk tanks filling, GPS tracked tankers moving on dark roads, regional laboratories processing samples from yesterday's pickups, quality coordinators reviewing results, our transportation dispatchers adjusting tomorrow's routes, the marketing team updating its view of available supply against contracted demand. 55 billion pounds, moving every day without stopping. The cooperative that moves it exists because in 1998, the leaders of 4 regional cooperatives decided that the scale they could build together was the only scale that could negotiate effectively in the market they faced. The logic has not changed. The market has gotten larger, or more concentrated on the processing and retail side, more demanding in its quality and supply requirements. The cooperative's response has been to grow alongside it. 11,000 farms, 48 states, 55 billion pounds, building the infrastructure that delivers what the market requires at a scale that no regional organization could sustain alone. If this look at how the largest dairy cooperative in the United States actually functions, the logistics, the marketing, the quality management, the data systems, and the governance that holds 11,000 farms together gave you a clearer picture of the infrastructure behind everyday dairy products. Hit the like button and help the algorithm find more viewers who want this level of detail. Subscribe for more stories that go behind the numbers of the systems that move food across the country. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. These stories reach places we don't always expect, and hearing from those places matters every time.